This is a recent slide presentation that was given at Howard University the 1st of October 2009. This was the launch of the Power Study Group 2009. The event was sponsored by Abundant Life Health Attainment Center, which is located at 12164 Central Avenue, Mitchellville, Maryland, in the Mitchellville Plaza. Second floor office 227A is the suite number. You can reach us at 240-245-4147. What is swine flu? It's a novel influenza A H1N1 virus and contains 3 types of genes: human, pig, and bird. The question is, what's its origin? Natural versus man-made. Don't get confused. No one is saying that pigs can fly. Swine flu is talking about swine influenza. First question, does it make swine sick? Not really. In fact, there has not been any such virus found in pigs from 1930 until 1998. And in fact, some pigs got infected from a Mexican migrant worker in Canada. So why is it called swine flu? Hey, well, just take a look at the picture. You might be able to figure that out. Or maybe they're calling the rest of us swine to be disposed of. Where did it start? Well, the story goes that in La Gloria, Mexico, where there is a huge swine farm, is where the epicenter of the epidemic is, and the patient 0 is little 4-year-old Edgar Hernandez. So who's responsible? Is it little Edgar? Or who's this guy? Dr. Dr. Taubenberger. We'll see in a minute. Where is swine flu now? It's all over the place. According to WHO, probably all 194 countries in the world have at least one case of swine flu. Although it's hard to tell nowadays because specific testing for H1N1 has been suspended in all countries. So from now on, any reports of swine flu are basically the figment of someone's imagination. How can you really tell if no one is testing? In the United States, it's in all 50 states, with the epicenter being in the state of Wisconsin, of all places, especially Milwaukee. But major outbreaks have occurred in Texas and Florida, California, especially New York. So what's the deal in Washington? Well, someone shows up with the swine flu vaccine, but it's too late. Washington has already sold out to Big Pharma. They have, in fact, indemnified the pharmaceutical firms that manufacture vaccines so that even if someone is injured by a vaccine, they can't sue. The history of swine flu goes back, as far as we know, to 1918, the so-called Spanish flu, which killed many, many people all over the planet. There was a second major epidemic in the 20th century in 1957, the so-called Asian flu, followed in 1968 by the Hong Kong flu. And this slide was, this chart that's on this slide was actually produced before 2009. And so there's a question mark as to what the next pandemic is. Well, I guess this is it. We have to ask the question, is history repeating itself? The 1918 Spanish flu was the H1N1 swine flu. It had a 2.5% mortality rate, but that didn't stop it from killing 675,000 Americans. And globally, it's estimated that no less than 50 million, but probably in excess of 100 million people died. What was strange was that most of the victims were the young and the healthy. Not old people, as we see with the seasonal flu, but people at the peak of physical health and vigor. The picture shows one of the centers where the Spanish flu victims were housed. The Spanish flu occurred in 3 waves during the years 1918 and 19. It began in the late spring, early summer of 1918 with a little peak there on the left, with relatively minor mortality. But then by the end of September, going into October of 1918 and into the winter months, you have the massive second wave, which was the killer wave. And this is where most of the victims of the swine flu actually died. And then this was followed later in 1919 by a smaller third wave. If history is repeating itself, what would be the mortality in 2009? Is history being repeated itself in another way? In 1976, there was a swine flu epidemic. It was an H1N1 virus with a virtual 0% mortality rate. No deaths from the virus. But there was a rush by the government to produce vaccine. They produced 100 million doses of vaccine, administered 40 million doses, and before it was all said and done, the virus killed nobody, but there were hundreds of deaths from the vaccine and thousands of cases of Guillain-Barré. Guillain-Barré is a viral-caused neurological disorder that leads to lower limb paralysis. It's virtually indistinguishable from polio. Did anybody predict what's taking place right now? Well, this is from a study conducted by the U.S. Air Force called Alternative Futures for 2025. Security planning to avoid surprise. Well, we wouldn't want to be surprised by an epidemic in 2009 that kills 30 million people. We wouldn't want that to take us by surprise, would we? So here we have a timeline starting in 1996. It goes all the way through to 2025. But right smack dab in the middle, the U.S. Air Force is predicting an influenza epidemic killing 30 million in the year 2009. Whoa, how did they know that? Well, maybe this is a way to unravel that answer. This guy here on the right, we saw him before. That's Dr. Taubenberger. And he's a molecular pathologist at the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology in Rockville. And his team worked for 10 long years to piece together the deadly virus that caused the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918 and 1919. Now, why would somebody want to do that? What they did, they got their samples from small pieces of lung tissue preserved in wax. And then from that, they were able to reconstruct the Spanish flu virus. We're not going to spend a lot of time looking at the different genes, but basically they produced a triple reassortment virus that was the recreation or the resurrection of the Spanish flu virus. Why would you do such a thing, Dr. Taubenberger? In his own words, we are trying to understand 2 basic things about the 1918 influenza. Number 1, how did the pandemic virus form? In a laboratory? And 2, why was it so virulent? Meaning, why was it so deadly? My question is, why didn't you leave sleeping dogs lie? Having the complete sequence is helping us to answer these questions. But even more importantly, we are trying to understand the lessons of the 1918 virus to learn more general rules about how pandemics form and cause disease. You want to know how to do that? For example, we have found that the H5N1, that's the bird virus, share some changes with 1918 that we think will be important for the virus adapting to humans. H5N1 virus has a mortality rate, by the way, of about 60%. So if you combine that with the swine flu, hey, that's a real killer. So look at this timeline. 1996, U.S. military predicts flu epidemic in 2009. That's foresight, isn't it? 1997, Taubenberger heads to Alaska with his team, and by 1997 reports that the 1918 killer virus was a